a large part of the back of his head.
Did this person crawl from where he was at, or did somebody drag him over there?
It's up to Lieutenant Joe Kenda to see if the murder is spillover from a domestic disturbance.
Hey!
Or something more nefarious.
This story is totally bizarre. Who would do that?
Then, a young mother's death leads detectives down a troubling path.
We have all these theories starting to run around in our mind.
Maybe Mrs. Hancock was murdered.
Did somebody stage a suicide?
Everybody else is lying. But what do we have to do to get to the truth? The system revolves around proof, as it should. Opinions don't matter. Everybody has opinions. Don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me what you believe. Tell me what you can prove.
It's 1:45 a.m. in Colorado Springs, and the roads are all but empty as TV ad saleswoman Janice Smithson makes her way home.
Hey, stop! Stop!
She's driving. She notices a couple of young teenage boys out in the street trying to flag her down.
What? What is it? What?
There's a guy over there. I think he's dead.
We don't know.
I don't know who it is.
She looked over, and sure enough, she saw a body laying there.
But she was able to take action better than most of us would.
She's an ex-police officer. She was trying to figure out what to do.
As she scans the surrounding area, Janice notices a police cruiser parked down the street and springs into action.
Okay, listen to me. This is very important. Stay put. Don't touch anything around him. I'm going to get help. Don't touch him.
But as Janice approaches the police cruiser,
Hello?
she realizes the vehicle is empty.
Officers?
There was no officers around. So she instinctively opened the door, got on the radio,
Dispatch? Calling dispatch?
and identified herself as an ex-police officer.
2 boys. They found a dead body.
A few blocks south, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is kicking back with some friends.
I normally never went out without my wife, but in this occasion I did go with a bunch of guys to a cop bar where cops tend to go when they want to have a few drinks.
Here's your ginger ale.
But I was on call, so I couldn't drink.
Hey, where's the grenadine?
I'm sorry?
Shirley Temple.
So they're drinking, and I'm a little annoyed that I cannot. And then it's just as well because my pager goes off.
Work's calling.
I'd rather just go than sit here and not be able to have as much fun as they're having. So it was kind of relieved.
10 minutes later, Kenda arrives on Chestnut Street.
I'm afraid you have to bear with us. We're still piecing this together.
Understood. So what do we got so far?
We have a deceased male, some sort of massive head injury, no wallet, no ID, identity unknown. 2 teenagers found him, they were there. And that's what we have so far.
Okay, thanks.
I go over to look at the body. The hair is soaked in blood, the face is covered in blood. His body's twisted at the curb. There's automotive glass in the middle of the road. So your first thought is this is an auto pedestrian hit and run. His leg looks like it's badly broken. So I know next to him, I felt through his blue jeans, it just felt unusual.
Oh, okay.
It was a prosthetic leg.
I thought I'd better raise the cuff just to confirm that it is artificial. And I pushed him by the hip forward a little bit to raise that pant leg.
Here we go.
And there's a wallet under his hip.
They ID'd him as Roy Johnson, 22, had a good job at a tech company. He had this prosthetic leg since he was 5 because of a birth defect.
Roy liked to ski. He got involved with a ski group in Loveland, Colorado for the disabled. He was a kind-hearted guy.
There was no cash whatsoever in the wallet.
This was really before the days of ATMs, and so you always had to have a little bit of cash. So to have a wallet with an ID and no cash was really odd.
What happened to you, Mr. Johnson?
Kenda takes a closer look at the victim's injuries and is disturbed by what he sees.
3 gunshot wounds to the head. Now this changes everything dramatically. It's not a traffic case, it's a murder.
Moments later, a patrol officer turns up even more evidence.
They discover a car, maybe 50 yards away. Out of the view of the scene, we run a listing on the plate, and it comes back to our victim, Roy Johnson. The driver's door side window is blown out, and there is blood in the driver's compartment. Obviously, this is the car where this shooting took place.
Well, that explains the broken glass.
A passenger shoots him 3 times in the head, drags him to the curb, leaves him there like yesterday's trash, and drives off in this car. It's extremely odd, but the physical evidence doesn't lie.
But there's one thing Kenda can't square. If the shooter drove off in Roy Johnson's vehicle, why did they then abandon it less than a block away?
I'm gonna go talk to the kids.
Hoping for answers, Kenda turns his attention to the 2 teens who discovered the body.
Step out of the car, please.
I start with a kid named Noah Peters in a backseat of a police car. So Noah, what are you doing out here this time of night?
Well, my friend Brian and I went to go see a movie, a horror movie, and, well, afterwards we were walking home and we saw something up on the side of the road, and so we went to go check it out. I'm not gonna be able to sleep in weeks.
That can't be real.
At first they thought, was this a dummy like some of the things that we saw in the movie?
So Brian kicks the body to find out.
It's like a wooden dummy.
No, dude, I think that's real.
And Noah gets immediately sick and throws up the popcorn he just purchased at the movie theater.
And you didn't touch the body anymore, move it or anything?
No. I mean, well, not after I kicked it.
He won't look at me now. I know that I'm being lied to by Noah Peters. Not only am I a policeman who gets lied to every day, I'm a parent.
Okay, Noah, get back in the car.
I can't go home.
No.
I get Brian out of the car. Now it's his turn.
Step out of the car.
He tells the same story.
I think a little more happened with you and Noah before you flagged that woman down. What I think is you start poking around that body, found the guy's wallet, and helped yourself to his cash.
And I said, I believe that you're an accessory after the fact of this murder by taking money from the corpse. You ever been in jail, Brian? They like guys like you.
I'm sorry, I needed a tennis racket.
Really?
Noah, get your butt over here.
I said, Noah, I need your end of the proceeds. I've already got Brian's. Give me the cash.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
You know, I should take both of you down to the station right now. But I think I'm not gonna do that.
I said, remember this for the rest of your life. A policeman gave you a brick.
Get out of here and go straight home.
Yes, sir.
Kenda hands the cash to CSI.
Go ahead and bag that from the guy's wallet.
And turns to the patrol sergeant.
So what did the woman say to call 911?
Well, she didn't actually call 911. She radioed it in.
So there's a police car already in the area?
Yes.
Kenda learns officers were responding to a call at an apartment complex down the street.
They had been dispatched to a domestic disturbance where a gunshot had been fired.
Now we have a gunshot victim a few blocks away and another gunshot fired in this apartment. Is that a coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences. I never have. We have 22-year-old Roy Johnson shot in a car. That car's discovered down the street from an apartment building that we now know is the scene of a parallel investigation involving another gunshot.
Around 3 a.m., Kenda arrives at the apartment in question, where he finds a tense scene still playing out.
There's a couple of patrol officers still there. They're talking to a male who's a pretty good-sized fellow. And there's a young woman laying on the floor. She's sobbing uncontrollably.
So what exactly happened here?
We're trying to sort it out. We have a married couple, Audrey Diaz and Harry Wright. We have one shot fired, no one injured.
Neighbors reported hearing a gunshot inside the residence.
Who shot and why?
He says she did, but I have my doubts about that. I was here a week ago on a domestic. She was beat up pretty bad.
Now, I immediately look at Harry, who's now looking at the floor, and I'm thinking, well, Mr. Badass, you can beat up a woman, but you won't take a swing at any of us now, will you?
What do you think, Audrey? Can you tell me what happened here tonight?
She's been drinking.
I can see that.
So we decide that we will invite her to our headquarters building to let her sober up a little bit, along with Harry.
As the couple is transported to CSPD headquarters, Kenda searches the apartment for signs of gunfire.
There was a hole in the wall in the living room.
The investigation showed that probably the gunshot was fired from inside the doorway, through a curtain and into the wall.
Kenda needs to know who fired the gun and why. As he studies the scene, one possible scenario emerges.
What the hell are you talking about?
I wasn't talking to anybody.
I saw you. I went to the bathroom.
We were at this bar, and they come home.
Trying to get me angry. Hey! I'm sick of this.
They're continuing and they're fighting. She goes in the apartment, locks the door.
Audrey, open up the door!
He breaks the window. And he fires a shot. He missed her.
Lieutenant, found this in the kitchen.
It is a 5-shot capacity, and they find 4 expended 38 caliber casings. So we have 1 shot fired in this apartment. We have a dead guy in the street who has 3 other ones. 3 + 1 = 4. There is no way that this is not involved in my murder.
Within the hour, Kenda is seated across from Harry Wright in the interrogation room, demanding some answers.
So, Harry, last week you're beating up Audrey. This week you're shooting at her. What's next?
I'm quite honestly sympathetic toward Audrey Diaz that she's been abused by this guy. He's twice her size.
Tell me why you shot at her.
I didn't shoot at Audrey. She put the bullet in the wall.
And he said, I came home and Audrey wasn't there. So I had a couple of beers, I watched TV, and then I went to bed.
At around 1:15, I hear our window crashing in. I got up to see what the hell's going on. And there she is, standing there with a gun in her hand.
This story is totally bizarre. Why would anybody come back to their own apartment, break a window, and then fire a shot? Who would do that?
I'm telling you, she's crazy.
Really, Harry?
While Kenda may believe Harry was the true instigator of the incident between he and Audrey Diaz, it's unclear how this ties back to his murder victim.
You recognize this guy? Roy Johnson?
No, never seen him.
Well, that's interesting, because this is a guy we found shot to death with a gun very similar to the one we found in your apartment.
I didn't shoot Roy Johnson. I'm telling you, if anybody wound up dead, it was Audrey, it wasn't me.
Now, make yourself comfortable. You're gonna be here until we figure out who did this.
We leave Harry on ice. Audrey's still hammered and can't talk to me about anything. So we decide we're gonna go to Roy's house and see what we can learn there. A sleepy young man opens the door, announcing he is Richard Lynn.
Richard, I'm sorry to disturb you tonight. Do you know an individual by the name of Roy Johnson?
Roy, yeah, he's my roommate. What's up?
Roy lived at my house for a little over 7 months. He was just a nice guy. He'd try to help you out as best as he could.
And when was the last time you saw him?
Tonight we had drinks at the Candlelight Inn. Listen, I'll go get Woody. You guys can talk to him yourself.
Woody?
Roy got the name of Woody just because of his wooden leg.
I'll just go grab him real quick. I left the bar early, but he should still be here.
Well, actually, that's the reason why we're here.
And we are then forced to explain that Roy Johnson is not in his room. We discovered him shot to death.
I was so shocked.
What?
To hear that he'd been shot because he was not an aggressive type of person to go out and look for trouble.
Do you know if Roy knew a Harry Wright or an Audrey Diaz?
No, never heard of him.
I'm sorry about what happened to your friend. Thanks for your time.
Though Richard's statement doesn't connect the dots between Roy Johnson and Harry Wright, Kenda isn't leaving empty-handed.
We learned Roy left that evening to go to the Candlelight Inn. That's a big lead. We need to go follow that up right away.
Although it's 4:15 a.m. and the Candlelight Inn is closed, Kenda is happy to discover the bartender is still there, closing out the register.
Hi, what can I do for you?
I'm Lieutenant Kenda. Do you happen to recognize this gentleman, Roy Johnson?
Yeah, that's Woody. He was here last night. He was here with Audrey.
And I looked at her and I said, who? Who is he talking to?
Audrey Diaz. She's kind of a strange chick. She comes in here every so often. In fact, they were just over here tonight, drinking, having a good old time.
I'm into computers.
Computers?
Yeah.
So my assumption was correct. The disturbance and the murder are connected. This investigation just went into overdrive. We have a homicide involving a man that has been shot. That led us to his car, which led us to the possibility of another disturbance, which led us to two people. We're following the trail here.
Kenda has determined that in the hours prior to his murder, Roy Johnson was hanging out at the Candlelight Inn, flirting with Audrey Diaz.
I saw that they left together, and I was a little concerned about that.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Roy is the sweetest guy, and she is just a wild woman. And she's been abused in the past, and it affects her relationships with men.
I said, what do you mean? Explain that. Well, she would go from 0 to 100 miles an hour if some male did something she didn't like.
Thank you.
Anytime. It's been so good hanging out with you tonight.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. Get off me.
Audrey has been thrown out of every bar in town because of this bizarre nature of her behavior, from smiling and coquettish to violent and homicidal.
Not too long ago, she actually said to me that if somebody starts harassing her again, that she's really just gonna kill him.
Well, no, that really is important. Did something Roy said or did set her off?
As the sun rises over Colorado Springs, Kenda heads back to headquarters, intent on getting the truth out of Audrey Diaz.
What do you want me to tell you, sir? I'm here to help.
Audrey comes across as a polite, sweet young lady. She does not seem to be the personality that can violently kill someone.
Well, Audrey, I'd like you to tell me what happened to your apartment last night. How'd the window get broken?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was really, really scary. Someone was banging on the door and yelling, and I didn't recognize the voice, so, obviously I refused to let him in the house.
She said this guy she's never saw before. He broke the window out, unlocked the door. She grabbed a pistol that she knew she had in the apartment. She recognized right away that he also had a gun.
Well, he shot at me, and I guess there's an angel watching over me because, he missed, and I shot back at him, but only because I had to, he was gonna kill me.
Okay, Audrey, you and I both know that's not what happened.
I said, Roy Johnson didn't have a gun.
Kenda also informs Audrey that there was only one bullet hole found in the house, and it was made by the gun she and Harry Wright kept there.
I know that you shot Roy in his car, not at your place. You don't remember that?
When I say that, there is a change that comes over her in a microsecond. The sweet little innocent girl flies away, and a mask rises from her face, and Audrey becomes a cold-eyed female, staring at me.
I need a lawyer.
There are two Audreys. One is sweet and innocent, and the other is a calculating killer. Wow.
Officer? Yes, sir? Cuff her and take her to booking. She's being charged with murder.
Ma'am, standard.
Even without a confession, Kenda believes he knows what happened.
We have Roy Don Johnson in this bar, artificial legs, shy around girls.
Hey.
Here comes this pretty little thing in the bar.
Hey.
Do you want to buy me a drink?
Yeah, sure. I'm Roy.
Audrey.
So now we're having this friendly conversation, he and she. He's buying the drinks. Roy says to her as the evening gets on, "Can I give you a ride home?"
Do you want to go now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please.
Yep.
Yeah, after you.
Let's go.
Now, maybe in Roy's mind, he's thinking maybe there may be some liaison possibilities with this young lady once he takes her home. What she's up to is getting free drinks from this guy and also getting a ride home.
You can drop me off here. Thanks for the ride. It's really nice.
Yeah, no, I just,
Now, to consider what might have been said or might have been done by Roy is nothing more than speculation. I have no idea.
I really appreciate you hanging out with me and everything.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe, like, we could hang out or something.
No, don't touch me. Get away from me.
Calm down, would you? What's wrong? Hey, calm down.
Whatever it was, it pulled Audrey's trigger.
Listen, whoa, hey, let's talk.
And then Audrey responds with gunfire.
I'm sure Roy was scared to death when that gun was pointed at his face. Just, that split second of just terror, and then it's over.
She kills him, drags him out of the car, and then she goes home.
She breaks into her own apartment and fires around. She's setting up an alibi. This is something a calculated person would do. Somebody that has just committed murder and is trying to cover her tracks.
Though the physical evidence against her is solid, Audrey refuses to admit guilt, and 11 months later, the case goes to trial.
Her defense was that she was actually attacked in the car.
I just couldn't understand how he could do that. A guy with his physical disability would not be able to jump over a console and attack anybody.
It's a sentiment shared by the jury, up to a point. They find Audrey guilty, not of murder, but of reckless manslaughter. She is sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Chance encounters happen every day in every country in the world, and violence occurs. Life is random. No one likes to think that, but it's true.
Coming up, a young mother is dead, but Kenda can't tell if it's a suicide or something more sinister.
We need something, anything black and white, and we don't have it. And we're in this grayness where we hate to be, and I can't get me out of it.
A graveyard shift for Officer David Rodriguez has him in search of a strong cup of coffee.
He sees a gas station where he can get a cup of coffee and does a U-turn.
Dispatch to car 39.
339, go ahead.
And as he does that, he gets a call.
We have a call with female not breathing at 2929 Tremont Street. Please respond.
10-4, I'll be en route.
Police.
He's banging on the door, yelling police,
Someone call the police.
knowing somebody's made a call.
When there's no answer, Officer Rodriguez tries the door and finds that it's unlocked.
Baby, please don't.
When he opens the door, he's shocked. There's a couple, and they're lying on the floor. They're holding hands. The man is hysterical. The woman, she appears to be dead.
Within the hour, Lieutenant Joe Kenda is on the job.
Hey, Drew.
Hey, LT.
So what do we got?
Expired female from an apparent hanging.
The manner of death is reported to be suicide. Our purpose is to determine if we agree with that assessment.
The deceased has been identified as 34-year-old Josie Hancock. She was apparently found around 2 a.m. by her husband, Bill.
Where's the husband?
They took him to the hospital for observation. He was pretty hysterical, a little intoxicated. We talked to him briefly before they took him.
All right, let me take a look.
Josie, baby. No, please.
Bill Hancock reports that he found his wife hanging from this extension cord. He took her down from it, laid her down, unwrapped the cord from around her neck.
No, baby.
There's a knocked over chair next to that. The extension cord is still attached to the hook in the ceiling.
You're gonna want to take a look at this.
It's an apparent suicide note. The note reads, "Damn it, Bill, you asked for it. Now you can have it all. Tell the kids I love them. Bye, Josie."
Short and not so sweet.
Suicide in many ways is an angry thing. I've seen suicide notes 20 pages long in cursive handwriting. This one is very brief and is therefore unusual.
You mentioned kids. Are the kids here?
We've triple checked. We haven't found anything that indicates the children live here.
With no other potential witnesses present, Kenda returns to the question at hand. Did Josie take her own life? Or was she murdered?
In suicides, if they jump off a chair, their neck is broken. When you look at her, there's ligature strangulation marks, but her neck is intact. So it's not the application of force of the fall that's killed her, it's the restriction of the air supply.
It's clear Josie didn't jump from the chair, but that's not the only scenario in which she could have taken her own life.
She could have been sitting in the chair with that around her neck and just dropped her head until she went to sleep in her mind, a sleep she never wakes up from.
But the more Kenda studies the scene, the more he doubts Josie's death is a bona fide suicide.
A plant hook? You gotta be kidding me.
The victim weighed about 100 pounds. It seemed like a lot of weight to hang from the plant hook.
It's starting to look a little sketchy.
I'm getting the feeling that this is maybe not a suicide.
All right, let's get the FBI to analyze the note, to see if it's their handwriting. Let's get someone in here to do a weight test on the plant hook, see if it'll actually hold.
Okay.
Kenda wonders if Josie's grieving husband, Bill, is in fact responsible for her death.
Hey, Lieutenant.
When a compelling piece of evidence is discovered in the bedroom.
We have a broken window. This causes great concern because we don't know why it was broken. Was it used as a manner to get into the apartment to possibly kill our victim?
If Bill Hancock killed his wife and staged it as a suicide, why would he stage a burglary as well?
It just doesn't make any sense. Let's go talk to the neighbors, see what they can tell us.
It doesn't take long for patrol officers to locate a neighbor who knows the Hancocks, or at least one of them.
Hey, Lieutenant, this is Christy Bowman.
She's very upset that this happened.
You know Josie and Bill well?
A little. Josie just moved in not that long ago.
Now, that struck me as unusual because she didn't say Josie and Bill. She said Josie moved in.
Don't you mean Josie and Bill just moved in?
No, just Josie. She said they were estranged. Bill comes by on the weekends occasionally.
Christy Bowman's statement, coupled with the mysterious broken window, makes Kenda wonder if Josie's death might be a suicide after all.
Hey, Joes.
So when you hear that, you think, okay, maybe he comes by to see her.
Hey. Hello. Joes.
He sees her hanging.
Joes, babe.
And has to break in rather than be let in to try to save her. Could that have happened?
In search of answers, Kenda heads to the hospital to speak with Josie's husband.
Bill? I'm Lieutenant Kenda.
Because he's in an emotional state, I asked some questions that are fairly basic. How is your relationship with Josie?
I'll be honest with you, it's been pretty rocky as of late.
What do you mean?
I mean, we weren't talking divorce or anything, but I stay at a motel and I can only see her on the weekends.
We saw the note. She mentioned children?
Yeah, they're Josie's from a previous relationship, but they all live with their dad. See, Josie kind of has a drinking problem, and social services came and took all her kids away.
Here's a person who has an alcohol problem, her kids taken away from her, and she has a relationship not going well. So could all this add up to somebody wanting to end their days? It very easily could.
Can you tell me what happened last night when you found her?
I came into town for the weekend, and we went to this bar because we were talking about getting back together. Good try.
But according to Bill, a few drinks in, his wife's eye began to wander.
Or we could go somewhere else. Why this is a surprise to him, I'm still not entirely clear. Alcoholics drinking typically do not produce particularly desirable behavior.
Josie, I told you, let's go.
What?
You're up. Get over here right now.
Stop! Leave me alone!
Josie!
Bill says she leaves. He decides it's better to just let her cool off, and he stays at the bar for some time. It's finally getting late. He decides to call it a night.
I went back to her house to see if she was still mad at me, and when I got there, she was hanging.
Now, what he doesn't mention is how did he get into this apartment? How did he get in?
My keys.
Can you show me the key that you used?
No, I don't have them on me.
You don't know where it is?
What do you know about the broken window?
What broken window?
He's obviously lying.
Pretty nasty cut you have there. You want to take another crack at the broken window question?
I confront him, and all he does is yell at me, I'm telling the truth. Well, no, you're not, Bill. So what do we have to do to get to the truth? So our initial investigation of the death of Josie Hancock reveals a suicide. The more we investigate, the less we like the suicide, and the more we like Bill being involved in it.
Following a frustrating interview with Bill Hancock, Kenda maps out a new strategy.
We're going to let Bill go.
All right. We'll be talking again.
We need to find out more about this relationship issue between he and his apparently estranged wife.
To do so, Kenda tracks down Josie's sister Joylyn and immediately gets an earful.
Bill told me about your sister's bout with alcohol and her depression about losing the children.
Yeah. Did he also talk about how he tried to strangle her one time?
He didn't.
So you think you're gonna quit drinking, huh?
I have quit drinking.
Don't you realize you're nothing without me? What about your kids? You realize?
According to the sister, Josie had come to her on a number of occasions reporting that Bill physically abused her, to include one attempt at manual strangulation.
Though Bill Hancock was never formally charged with domestic assault, the abuse allegations have massive repercussions for the investigation.
That was a whole big new side. There were all of a sudden a whole realm of questions that popped up.
She'd had enough, and she finally left him. She was trying to keep things friendly with him until the divorce was final.
Now, when she said that, I'm remembering what Bill said, that we haven't decided to get a divorce yet. He has lied to us.
Josie's so scared of him. The relationship wasn't getting better. It was getting worse.
We are building a circumstantial case against Bill, which is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. We need physical evidence to have a prosecutable and winnable case.
After speaking with Josie's sister, Kenda heads back to the crime scene where his team will conduct some tests that could prove Josie's death was no suicide.
Gentlemen, hook's right here.
We need to determine whether that hook could actually maintain that amount of weight.
I was convinced that the hook would pull out of the ceiling. It was just a small hook in sheetrock like you would hang a 10-pound weight on.
In order to conduct these tests, they obtained identical electrical cords, and Josie's body at the morgue weighed 94.5 pounds. They attached weights to that cord that weighed 94.5 pounds.
They tied the weights on it, and then they dropped them to simulate a body falling off of a chair or jumping off of a chair.
Release it.
I'll be damned.
The plant hook may have held, but the noose didn't.
The cord broke, so jumping off the chair, the cord would have snapped and thus should be alive.
Well, she can kill herself by jumping off that chair. Let's try the other way.
We lower this weight to the floor slowly, as if Josie was slowly tightening the noose around her own neck.
Okay, let's go. Let go.
It still didn't have any effect on the hook or the ceiling.
The cord stretched, but it held. So it would be possible for her to cause her own death.
It's unlikely she hung herself that way, but
it is possible.
Thank you. An impartial judgment on his part, which is what it's supposed to be.
Despite the mixed results of the tests, Kenda remains convinced that Bill Hancock is responsible for his wife's death. He arranges a second interview with Bill for the following morning.
Well, Bill, it seems you left out a few important details last time we talked. You failed to mention the abuse, the fact that your divorce was being finalized.
Josie drinks. She says a lot of crazy things. And I swear to you, man, I've never touched her.
At one point, he gets belligerent. He says, I don't know why you keep asking me. I've told you the complete truth.
I want a lawyer. Got it?
Though Bill Hancock refuses to say anything else.
Sure, we can do that.
Kenda has enough information to form a theory about how Josie Hancock lost her life.
Let's go.
We know that Bill probably did drive over to surprise her for the weekend.
I'm taking the first shots every time.
She agrees to go with him to a bar that they both frequented.
What are you doing? Yeah, how you playing tonight?
Hey, Josie, I told you, let's go.
What?
You're up. Get over here.
No, I'm good.
Come over here.
I'm good.
She's thinking, this is why we're getting a divorce.
Where you going?
No, I'm
Josie.
Bill, stop. Just leave me alone.
So she gets her own way home and leaves him high and dry in this bar.
Josie!
We know when he's discovered by the police, he's very intoxicated. So he probably stays at the bar and begins to get more emotional and more angry.
Josie! Josie! Let me in!
Bill appeared to be the kind of guy that was not going to miss having the last word. He may well have gone to her apartment. She may have refused to let him in. And he may have let himself right in through the window.
No, you need to leave. Bill, leave.
Here's a person that maybe already abused her in the past is now coming directly at her.
No,
finds the extension cord and he strangles her with that cord. He's killed her. Now panic sets in. Drunk as he is, he comes up with this plan.
Why'd you do that?
To stage it and make it look like a suicide. We unwrap the cord, we throw the cord over the plant hook, we write a note, we leave the note, we call 911, and we be the aggrieved husband when the police arrive. That's his plan.
Although suicide remains a remote possibility, the district attorney is confident enough in Kenda's case to charge Bill Hancock with first-degree murder. But just before the trial, additional forensic evidence emerges that throws another wrench into the mix.
The examination of the handwriting on the suicide note comes back. Our forensic document expert tells us that he cannot say that the suicide note was a forgery, that it is possible that Josie wrote this note.
More unsure of a conviction than ever, prosecutors decide to drop all charges against Bill Hancock.
The principle is you're innocent until proven guilty. In this case, we can't prove anything. Josie Henderson lost her life by her own hand or someone else's. It depends on who you believe.
The night Berlin stopped sleeping began with a sound no one could later agree on. Some said it was a scream, sharp and brief, swallowed by the concrete courtyards. Others remembered only the echo of hurried footsteps on wet pavement, the kind that don't belong to lovers or late-night workers, but to someone running away from something irreversible. In the early hours of an autumn morning in 1978, West Berlin was still divided by walls and suspicion, and in a narrow residential block near Kreuzberg, a door stood half open, light burning inside, silence pooling where a life had just ended. This was not yet a headline. It was not yet a cold case. It was simply a room where time had stopped, and a city that would soon realize it was going to wait decades for answers. By sunrise, the building was sealed with police tape. Residents leaned from their windows, coats pulled tight, whispering names they barely knew. Inside the apartment lay the body of a young woman, positioned not violently enough to suggest rage, not carefully enough to suggest peace. Her name was Anna Keller, 26 years old, a graphic design student, recently returned from visiting family in Hamburg. There were no signs of forced entry. No weapon left behind. No note. Just the unsettling impression that whoever had been there knew exactly when to arrive, exactly how long to stay, and exactly how to disappear into the waking city without being seen. Berlin police arrived quickly, but confidence drained almost as fast. The apartment told contradictory stories. A half-finished cup of tea on the table, still faintly warm. A chair pulled out, as if someone had been expected. The radio tuned to a late-night news program, volume low. Anna's handbag untouched. Money still in her wallet. Nothing missing that could explain why she was dead. For detectives trained to read chaos, this scene was disturbingly calm. Too calm. It felt less like a crime scene and more like the aftermath of a private conversation that had gone terribly wrong. Neighbors were questioned one by one. An elderly man downstairs claimed he heard arguing shortly after midnight, a man's voice, controlled but firm. A woman across the hall insisted she heard laughter, not anger, sometime after 1 in the morning. Another neighbor swore no one entered or left the building at all. In a city already fractured by walls and informants, memory itself seemed unreliable. Statements conflicted. Timelines blurred. And with every hour that passed, the certainty that this case would be solved quickly began to evaporate. Anna Keller was not known to be reckless. Friends described her as cautious, private, almost guarded. She worked evenings at a small print shop, spent weekends sketching posters and typography experiments, dreamed of moving to Paris someday. She had a small circle of friends, no known enemies, no history of violence in her relationships. Her parents, summoned from Hamburg, sat in a police office under flickering fluorescent lights, answering the same questions again and again, each repetition cutting deeper. Who visited her? Who called her? Who might want to hurt her? Each answer led nowhere, branching into more uncertainty. Detectives focused first on the obvious. Former boyfriends. Classmates. Co-workers. A recent acquaintance Anna had mentioned casually a week earlier, a man she met at a cafe, whose last name no one could remember. Files thickened with photographs, handwritten notes, cigarette smoke stains. But nothing stuck. Alibis checked out. Timelines collapsed under scrutiny. The city offered suspects by the dozen, but evidence offered none. Then there were the strange details, the ones that refused to fit neatly into any report. The apartment door had been unlocked, but not damaged. The window was open, though it was unusually cold that night. A neighbor claimed to see a man standing across the street for nearly an hour earlier that evening, smoking, watching the building, but could provide no description beyond average. Average height. Average build. Average face. In Berlin, average could mean anyone. As days turned into weeks, the case slipped from urgency into routine. Newspapers ran brief updates, then smaller mentions, then nothing at all. Another violent death in a city already accustomed to fear. But within the police department, frustration hardened into something more corrosive. Evidence had been mishandled in the first chaotic hours. Witnesses were re-interviewed too late. One crucial phone log from a nearby public booth was lost during a records transfer. Each mistake was minor on its own. Together, they formed a pattern that would haunt the investigation for years. By early 1979, Anna Keller's murder had become something investigators hated to say out loud. A cold case. A file moved from active desks to metal cabinets. Still present, still unresolved, but no longer urgent enough to dominate daily briefings. Detectives rotated out. New crimes demanded attention. The city moved on, but the apartment near Kreuzberg never quite did. New tenants reported uneasy feelings. Neighbors spoke of lights flickering without reason, of footsteps in the stairwell at night. Rational explanations existed for all of it, but the story had already embedded itself into the building's identity. Years passed. Berlin changed. The wall still stood, but the world on either side shifted. Technology advanced. DNA analysis began to appear in foreign reports, distant and experimental. Somewhere deep in storage, Anna Keller's file collected dust, its pages yellowing, its photographs fading. Her parents aged quietly, carrying unanswered questions into every holiday, every empty chair at family gatherings. Occasionally, a journalist would call, asking if there was anything new. There never was. Then, in the mid-1990s, the case resurfaced briefly. A retired detective gave an interview, admitting publicly that mistakes had been made. He spoke of pressure, of limited resources, of a city stretched too thin by politics and fear. His words reignited public interest for a moment. Tips flooded in. Old neighbors remembered new details. Someone claimed to have seen a man with a distinctive coat that night, another recalled a car parked illegally nearby. But memory, after nearly 2 decades, had softened and warped. Each tip led detectives down familiar dead ends. What made the Berlin 1978 case different was not just the absence of answers, but the persistence of a question no one could shake. If there was no forced entry, and no robbery, and no clear motive, then why had Anna Keller opened her door? Who had she trusted enough to let inside after midnight? The implication was chilling. The killer was not a stranger lurking in shadows. The killer had been invited. That idea lodged itself in the collective imagination of the community. It turned suspicion inward. Friends wondered about friends. Neighbors reconsidered casual greetings. Trust, already fragile in a divided city, thinned even more. The case became a cautionary tale whispered to daughters, a warning about familiarity being more dangerous than darkness. By the early 2000s, advances in forensic science prompted a quiet review of archived cases. Anna Keller's file was pulled once more. Evidence boxes were reopened. Items once thought useless were re-examined under new light. Fibers. Skin cells. Trace elements invisible in 1978. For the first time in decades, the case felt warm again, almost alive. But progress was slow, painstaking, uncertain. Every test raised hope, and every inconclusive result crushed it. And yet, something lingered beneath the surface, something detectives couldn't articulate but felt all the same. A sense that the truth had been close from the beginning, hidden not by complexity, but by familiarity. That the most shocking aspect of the case was not how long it had remained unsolved, but how ordinary its solution might one day appear. Because somewhere in Berlin, someone had lived an entire life after that night in 1978. They had walked past police stations, read newspapers, watched the city change. And all the while, the answer to a question that haunted generations had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when the past would finally refuse to stay buried. The file did not scream when it was opened again, but it carried a weight that every detective in the room could feel. Paper against paper, the soft rasp of cardboard evidence boxes sliding across a steel table, the smell of dust and old ink rising like breath from a grave. Anna Keller's name sat at the top of every page, typed in a font no one used anymore, each letter a reminder that time had moved on without her. Berlin had reinvented itself more than once since 1978, but the case remained frozen, locked in the logic and limitations of another era, waiting for someone stubborn enough to challenge it. The renewed review did not begin with revelations. It began with embarrassment. Reports that contradicted each other. Photographs taken from angles that obscured more than they revealed. A crime scene sketch that failed to mark the position of a chair that multiple witnesses had described. These were not dramatic failures, but quiet ones, the kind that accumulate until truth slips through the cracks. Younger investigators, trained in a world of databases and digital trails, stared at the material with disbelief. How had anyone expected to solve a murder like this? They started again from the beginning, replaying the night in their minds, minute by minute, breath by breath. Anna returns home late. She makes tea. She turns on the radio. She opens the door. Everything after that is an abyss. The key question remained unchanged after decades: who was on the other side of that door? The answer had to exist somewhere, embedded in routine, in habit, in a relationship that had once seemed harmless. Attention shifted to Anna's daily life, not the dramatic moments, but the mundane ones. The cafe she visited every morning. The tram line she took to the print shop. The corner store where she bought cigarettes for friends, though she didn't smoke herself. Investigators tracked down surviving acquaintances, now older, slower to recall, but sometimes more willing to speak. Time had loosened loyalties. Secrets felt heavier when carried too long. One former classmate remembered a man who occasionally waited outside the design building, leaning against the wall, pretending to read posters. He was never introduced. Never intrusive. Just present. Another recalled Anna mentioning someone who asked too many questions, though she'd laughed it off. At the time, it sounded like nothing. In hindsight, it sounded like a warning no one recognized. Then there was the phone call. Buried deep in the file was a single-line note, almost an afterthought. An unidentified male voice had called Anna's apartment earlier that evening. The call lasted less than a minute. No recording existed. In 1978, there rarely was. The call was logged, acknowledged, and then forgotten, overshadowed by physical evidence that never materialized. Now it took on a new gravity. If someone had called, they had announced themselves. They had made contact before crossing the threshold. The public phone booths near Anna's building were mapped again, their locations overlaid onto modern city plans. One booth, no longer standing, had been closest to her entrance. Records from that booth were incomplete, but not entirely missing. A partial list of outgoing calls survived in a separate municipal archive, overlooked for years. It didn't give names, only numbers. One number appeared twice that night, spaced roughly 40 minutes apart. The second call aligned almost perfectly with the estimated time of death. Tracing the number was an exercise in patience and luck. Lines had been reassigned, companies dissolved, records lost to bureaucratic purges. But eventually, the trail led to a residential address less than 2 kilometers from Anna's apartment. An unremarkable building. No prior connection documented in the original investigation. The occupant in 1978 had been a man in his early 30s, employed steadily, no criminal record, no history of violence. He had been interviewed once, briefly, because his name appeared in a neighbor's casual recollection. He was cleared within days. His name surfaced again now, not with drama, but with inevitability. The kind that makes a room go quiet. Investigators pulled his old statements and compared them to new testimonies. Small discrepancies emerged. Times that didn't quite align. Places he claimed to be that were never independently confirmed. None of it was enough on its own. It never is. But the picture began to tilt, just slightly, like a photograph hung crooked on the wall. You don't notice it at first. Then you can't see anything else. The man had moved several times since 1978. Married. Divorced. Changed jobs. Lived an ordinary life in a city full of ordinary lives. Friends described him as quiet, reliable, the kind of person you forget is in the room. That description, once comforting, now felt unsettling. Ordinary was exactly what the killer would have needed to be. Someone who didn't stand out. Someone Anna wouldn't hesitate to let inside. When detectives approached him again, decades after the fact, he was polite. Cooperative. Almost relieved to talk. He claimed memory loss, a natural erosion of detail over time. But memory is selective. He remembered trivial things clearly. The layout of his old apartment. The brand of cigarettes he smoked in the late 70s. The weather on the night in question. He remembered it was cold. Colder than usual. He did not remember calling Anna. DNA testing offered hope, but also frustration. Evidence from the crime scene was limited. Degraded. Contaminated. But one sample, preserved more by chance than foresight, yielded a partial profile. Not enough for certainty, but enough for comparison. When matched against the man's DNA, the result was not definitive. Not a confirmation. Not an exclusion. It hovered in the uncomfortable space between, statistically suggestive, legally fragile. The investigation stalled again, this time under the weight of its own expectations. The media caught wind of renewed activity. Headlines resurrected Anna Keller's name, pairing it with phrases like breakthrough and long-awaited answers. Her family was contacted once more, hope reopening wounds that had barely scarred. Detectives felt the pressure tighten. After so many years, anything short of truth would be another kind of failure. They returned to motive, the element that had always been missing. Why Anna? Why that night? The man's background revealed nothing obvious. No financial disputes. No documented romantic involvement. But psychology does not always leave paper trails. Sometimes it hides in patterns of behavior that only make sense when viewed backward. A former colleague of the suspect recalled an obsession with routines, with predictability. He disliked surprises. He preferred control. Anna, by all accounts, was kind, open, trusting. The kind of person who listens. The kind of person who doesn't immediately sense danger in familiarity. If he had confided in her, leaned on her emotionally, crossed boundaries slowly, invisibly, then the line between acquaintance and fixation might never have been noticed by anyone else. The theory took shape cautiously. Not announced. Not celebrated. Just tested against facts, like any other. If Anna had decided that night to set a boundary, to end a conversation, to refuse something unspoken, the calm scene in the apartment suddenly made sense. No struggle. No chaos. Just a moment where control was threatened, and someone reacted. But theory is not proof. And proof, after so much time, is fragile. Witnesses die. Memories fade. Evidence decays. The law does not bend for atmosphere or intuition. It demands certainty. As weeks turned into months, the case balanced on a knife's edge between resolution and relapse into silence. Detectives knew they were close to something, but closeness is not enough. Somewhere, buried under decades of normal life, was a truth that had survived untouched. The challenge was not finding it, but bringing it into the light without letting it dissolve under scrutiny. Berlin watched again, cautiously. Older residents remembered the fear, the whispers, the unanswered questions. Younger ones discovered the story for the first time, shocked that such a quiet crime could echo for so long. The city leaned in, listening, as if afraid that if it breathed too loudly, the truth might retreat once more. And through it all, one fact remained immovable. On a cold night in 1978, a door had opened. Someone had stepped inside. And nothing in Berlin had ever been quite the same since. The problem with reopening a past is that it does not stay still when you touch it. It shifts, resists, rearranges itself around what you want to see. As the Berlin 1978 cold case pressed forward once more, investigators discovered that certainty was not hiding in a single clue, but scattered across years of half-forgotten interactions, small decisions that once seemed harmless. The closer they looked, the more the case behaved like a living thing, adapting to scrutiny, revealing new shapes in the shadows it cast. The suspect's name, now spoken quietly in hallways and written cautiously in internal memos, began to pull gravity toward itself. Everything was re-examined through the lens of his possible involvement. His movements in the days leading up to the murder. His habits. His silences. Not to prove guilt outright, but to test plausibility. Could he have been there? Could he have known Anna well enough to be invited in? Could he have left without raising alarm? Each question tightened the circle. Investigators reconstructed his routine in 1978 with obsessive precision. He worked regular hours, returned home by early evening, frequented the same bar twice a week. On the night Anna died, he claimed to have stayed in, listening to the radio, nursing a cold. No witnesses. No receipts. In the original investigation, that absence of contradiction had been enough. Now it felt hollow. Solitude is not an alibi. It is a blank space that can be filled with anything. Attention turned to handwriting. Letters Anna had written. Notes she'd left for herself. Postcards sent to friends. Somewhere in her personal effects was a small notebook, pages filled with sketches, typography experiments, and brief personal reminders. On one page, written in the margin, was a name. Just a first name. Common. Easy to overlook. But it matched the suspects. The original detectives had dismissed it as coincidence. Now, coincidence felt like luxury the case could no longer afford. The notebook revealed more than that. There were dates circled. Short phrases written and crossed out. Call back? Too intense. Nice, but the fragments never completed their thoughts, but they carried a tone that had not been fully appreciated before. Hesitation. Evaluation. A weighing of trust. Anna had been thinking carefully about someone. Possibly about ending something before it grew uncomfortable. Possibly about asserting distance where someone else wanted closeness. Friends were asked again, not what they remembered, but how Anna behaved towards certain people. One recalled her mentioning a man who showed up unexpectedly, who seemed to know her schedule a little too well. Another remembered Anna joking that she had acquired a shadow. At the time, it sounded playful. Now it felt ominous. The language of unease often disguises itself as humor, especially when the alternative is fear. The suspect was confronted with these details gently, almost sympathetically. Detectives knew aggression would close him off. He listened carefully, nodded, frowned at appropriate moments. He admitted knowing Anna casually. He admitted liking her. He denied obsession. He denied visiting her apartment that night. His demeanor was consistent, but consistency can be practiced. The most unsettling thing was how reasonable he sounded. How unremarkable his explanations were. Evil, when it arrives quietly, rarely announces itself. Then came the inconsistency that could not be smoothed over. When asked about the notebook, about his name appearing in Anna's writing, he hesitated. Just long enough. He suggested she might have written it after meeting someone else with the same name. It was possible. Statistically plausible. Emotionally thin. The room shifted. Detectives exchanged glances, not of triumph, but of recognition. This was the first moment he seemed uncertain. Forensic psychologists were consulted. Not to label him, not to diagnose, but to interpret patterns. They spoke of boundary erosion, of perceived entitlement masquerading as affection. They spoke of individuals who build internal narratives in which rejection becomes betrayal. In such narratives, confrontation is not violence. It is correction. Restoration. The language was clinical, but the implications were chilling. Still, the law demanded more. Patterns do not convict. Stories do not imprison. Evidence must be tangible. Something that could survive a courtroom, withstand cross-examination, exist beyond reasonable doubt. The investigation returned again to the crime scene, this time not as it was, but as it had been described. They recreated the apartment in a training facility, placing furniture according to photographs and witness statements. They simulated movement, tested acoustics, explored lines of sight. What emerged was subtle but significant. From the hallway, a neighbor could hear raised voices. From the street, nothing. From the courtyard, only echoes. The apartment was a pocket of privacy. A place where tension could rise without spilling outward. And in that space, the lack of disturbance made sense. A conversation could escalate without alerting the building. A fatal moment could occur without screams carrying far enough to draw immediate attention. Another overlooked detail resurfaced. The tea. The cup found half-finished, still warm. If Anna had prepared tea for herself alone, it would likely have been drunk or cold by the time of death. But if she had prepared it for two people, if the ritual had been interrupted, the scene aligned differently. Hospitality. Normalcy. An attempt to keep things calm. To de-escalate. The suspect was asked if Anna ever made him tea. He smiled faintly and said yes. That detail had never appeared in any previous statement. He hadn't thought it was important. It wasn't incriminating. But it was intimate. It suggested access. Comfort. A level of familiarity that contradicted earlier claims of casual acquaintance. Pressure mounted. Not publicly, but internally. Detectives felt the weight of decades pressing down on every decision. One mistake now could collapse everything. They slowed down, documenting obsessively, anticipating every possible challenge. Meanwhile, the suspect continued living his life, aware of scrutiny but untouched by consequence. That imbalance gnawed at the investigators. Justice delayed does not feel like justice. It feels like permission. Then, unexpectedly, the case took a turn not through evidence, but through absence. A key witness, an elderly neighbor who had reported hearing voices that night, passed away. With her death went nuances never fully captured on paper. Tone. Intensity. Certainty. It was a reminder that time was not neutral. It was actively erasing the past, one memory at a time. That loss triggered urgency. Investigators broadened their search, revisiting anyone remotely connected to the suspect in 1978. Co-workers. Former partners. Old friends. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Stories of possessiveness. Of emotional volatility masked as concern. Of resentment when attention was not reciprocated. None of it illegal. All of it unsettling. One former girlfriend described an argument that turned frightening when she tried to leave. He blocked the door, not violently, but insistently, demanding explanations, demanding closure on his terms. She left eventually, unharmed, but shaken. At the time, she didn't report it. She didn't think it mattered. Now, decades later, she realized how close she might have come to being another name in a file. This testimony did not prove murder, but it illuminated capability. It showed how easily control could slip into coercion, how a calm exterior could conceal a volatile need for dominance. When layered over Anna's story, it filled in emotional gaps no physical evidence could reach. Still, there was resistance. Within the department, some questioned whether the case was being forced toward a conclusion because of its age, its symbolism. Cold cases invite projection. They demand endings. But truth does not owe anyone closure. The investigation teetered between persistence and obsession. As winter settled over Berlin again, mirroring the season of the crime, detectives faced a decision. Push forward with what they had, risking acquittal and public collapse, or wait, hoping for something stronger to emerge. The suspect sensed the tension. His cooperation cooled. His answers shortened. He asked about statutes of limitations. He asked what would happen if nothing could be proven. Those questions hung in the air, heavy with implication. They were not the questions of an innocent man certain of vindication. They were the questions of someone calculating distance, testing the edges of consequence. And somewhere in the city, Anna Keller's name resurfaced again in quiet conversations, in news articles read late at night, in the minds of people who wondered how many truths lived undisturbed among them. The past was no longer silent. It was pressing forward, demanding attention, daring Berlin to finally listen before it was too late. Time, in long investigations, becomes an adversary with perfect patience. It waits for doubt to creep in, for resolve to thin, for people to convince themselves that uncertainty is safer than accusation. In the Berlin 1978 case, time had already won many battles. Evidence had softened. Witnesses had vanished. But now, with momentum building again, time pushed back harder, testing whether the truth could still survive exposure. The suspect sensed it. His tone shifted subtly during interviews, not enough to justify alarm, but enough to register. Where once he had offered explanations freely, he now hedged, qualified, asked for questions to be repeated. He requested legal counsel, a move well within his rights, but one that marked a clear boundary. The conversation was no longer cooperative recollection. It was strategy. Detectives adjusted accordingly. They stopped asking him what he remembered and started asking what he could not explain. Why his phone number appeared twice in records linked to the closest booth to Anna's apartment. Why his earlier statements minimized a relationship that evidence suggested was more intimate. Why he recalled trivial details from that era with precision, yet claimed total amnesia regarding the hours surrounding the murder. Each question was placed carefully, not to provoke, but to measure resistance. Outside the interview rooms, the case team fractured into camps. Some believed they were circling the truth, that patience would yield the final piece. Others worried the investigation was drifting toward confirmation bias, interpreting every ambiguity as guilt. Cold cases attract certainty like magnets. The danger is mistaking momentum for proof. Supervisors demanded restraint. Every step had to be defensible, not just persuasive. The turning point came quietly, not with a confession or a dramatic discovery, but with a reanalysis of something that had always been there. The radio. The late-night news program Anna had been listening to when police arrived. Originally logged as background noise, irrelevant, it was now scrutinized with new intent. Investigators pulled archival broadcast schedules, reconstructing the exact program that aired during the estimated time of death. The content mattered less than the timing. The program included a short musical interlude that aired at a precise minute. According to the medical examiner's original report, Anna's death occurred within a narrow window that overlapped that segment. But one neighbor, interviewed decades earlier, had insisted the radio was silent when she passed the apartment shortly after 1 in the morning. The discrepancy had been dismissed. Radios get turned off. Memories blur. Except now, paired with broadcast data, it raised a possibility. The radio may have been turned off intentionally, not left playing as background. If so, then someone had altered the scene after the fatal moment. Someone calm enough to think about impressions. Someone aware that sound travels. It suggested deliberation, not panic. And deliberation aligned disturbingly well with what psychologists had described about the suspect's need for control. The apartment door offered another quiet revelation. Its lock, old and mechanical, had been tested in the past and deemed unremarkable. Now, with modern analysis, investigators noted were patterns inconsistent with normal use. The door had been locked and unlocked multiple times in quick succession that night. Not forced. Not damaged. Just manipulated. As if someone hesitated before leaving. As if someone locked the door, unlocked it, reconsidered, then left it ajar. That hesitation mattered. It spoke to indecision. To internal conflict. To a moment where the killer stood between escape and something else. Guilt. Fear. Or simply calculation. As these details accumulated, the narrative sharpened. Not into certainty, but into coherence. The night was no longer an abstract blur. It had shape. Rhythm. Anna opens the door to someone she knows. Conversation. Tension. Tea poured, perhaps to calm nerves. A boundary drawn. A refusal. A sudden shift. Violence contained, swift, devastating. Afterward, a pause. Adjustments. The radio. The door. The exit. The suspect's legal counsel grew more assertive. Requests were made to limit questioning. Media statements were carefully worded, emphasizing the presumption of innocence, warning against speculation. The public, however, had already begun to speculate. Articles appeared with cautious language but unmistakable implication. Berlin remembered how this story felt. The weight of an unresolved crime pressing against civic identity. Anna's family, long accustomed to silence, found themselves thrust back into attention. They were older now, their voices slower, but their grief unchanged. They spoke of Anna not as a symbol, but as a person. Her humor. Her impatience. Her plans. They asked, quietly, whether this time would be different. Detectives could not answer. Hope, once reawakened, is cruel when left unfulfilled. Behind closed doors, prosecutors were consulted. They reviewed the evidence with practiced skepticism. Circumstantial. Compelling. Fragile. They asked the question no one wanted to hear. Could this win in court? The answer was honest and unsatisfying. Maybe. Maybe not. The case rested on inference layered upon inference, strengthened by pattern but weakened by time. Then came the unexpected fracture. A document surfaced from a personal archive, not police, not official. A letter written in 1979 by a junior officer involved in the original investigation, never sent, never filed. It was found among his belongings after his death, discovered by a relative sorting through papers. The letter expressed concern about pressure from superiors to close the case quickly, to avoid public panic. It mentioned a suspect he believed warranted deeper scrutiny. The name was redacted, but contextual clues pointed unmistakably in one direction. The letter did not constitute evidence. It could not be introduced at trial. But it confirmed something investigators had suspected. The original inquiry had not failed purely because of ignorance or limitation. It had been curtailed. Directed away from discomfort. The truth, or something close to it, had been inconvenient. That realization hardened resolve. This was no longer just about Anna Keller. It was about institutional silence. About the cost of expedience. About how easily truth can be delayed when it threatens stability. Detectives pressed forward, knowing the window was narrowing. They revisited the suspect one final time before making a recommendation. The interview was shorter. Tighter. The questions fewer, sharper. When confronted with the accumulation of inconsistencies, he did not explode. He did not confess. He simply withdrew. His answers became legal phrases. His gaze fixed. The man who once spoke easily about the past now treated it like hostile territory. At one point, when asked directly why Anna might have written his name in her notebook alongside words suggesting hesitation, he paused longer than ever before. The room held its breath. Then he said she misunderstood him. That he had only wanted clarity. That things had gotten complicated. He stopped there. He did not elaborate. He did not deny being upset. He did not deny seeing her that night. Silence followed. Not the silence of innocence outraged, but the silence of calculation complete. The case team met afterward, exhaustion etched into every face. They laid out options. Proceed and risk failure. Hold back and risk losing everything to time. There was no clean choice. Only responsibility. Outside, Berlin moved through another winter. Streets glistened under streetlights. Cafes buzzed with conversation. Life, indifferent and persistent, continued. But beneath it, the past stirred, restless. A crime committed in quiet now demanded reckoning in noise. Somewhere between certainty and doubt, between memory and erasure, the Berlin 1978 cold case stood on the brink. Not yet solved. Not yet lost. Balanced precariously on what people were willing to confront, and what they were still tempted to leave buried. Momentum does not announce itself. It gathers quietly, like pressure behind a wall, invisible until something cracks. After decades of inertia, the Berlin 1978 cold case had reached that stage. Not solved. Not proven. But no longer dormant. Every movement now carried consequence, every hesitation risked collapse. The investigation entered a phase where progress and failure felt indistinguishable from the inside. The suspect's lawyer submitted formal complaints, accusing police of harassment, of reviving a case too weak to stand. The language was sharp, procedural, designed to chill initiative. Supervisors responded with restraint, approving only actions that could withstand scrutiny. No fishing expeditions. No shortcuts. Every step had to be earned. The result was a strange paralysis, motion without speed, urgency wrapped in caution. Detectives shifted focus again, not outward, but inward, toward what had been overlooked not because it was hidden, but because it was familiar. Anna's apartment had been examined countless times, but familiarity breeds blindness. This time, analysts treated it as if they were seeing it for the first time. They rebuilt the layout digitally, layered timelines over physical space, mapped human movement against seconds and meters. One question returned with stubborn insistence. How long had the killer stayed after Anna died? The original assumption had been minutes. Panic. Flight. But the details no longer supported that. The radio adjustment. The door manipulation. The careful absence of disturbance. These were not the actions of someone fleeing immediately. They suggested lingering. Time taken to think. To decide how the scene should look when discovered. Lingering implies confidence. And confidence implies familiarity with the environment, with the building, with the rhythms of the neighborhood. Investigators pulled old municipal records, not glamorous documents, but the dull infrastructure of city life. Who had access to keys? Who had lived nearby long enough to know which stairwells creaked, which neighbors stayed up late, which windows faced which angles? The suspect's address history revealed something previously underestimated. In 1978, he had lived not just near Anna, but along her daily route. He would have seen her regularly without arranging to. Familiarity could have grown asymmetrically, one-sided, unnoticed by her until it became intrusive. That kind of proximity erodes the line between coincidence and intent. Another fragment resurfaced from the original file. A report about a man seen in the building weeks before the murder, claiming to look for a friend on the 3rd floor. He had left when told the person didn't live there. The description was vague. Average. Unremarkable. The report had been filed and forgotten. Now it was read aloud again, slowly. Height. Hair. Coat. All compatible. Nothing conclusive. Everything suggestive. Investigators interviewed surviving residents from that period, now scattered across the country. One remembered the incident faintly. Another recalled feeling uneasy, though she couldn't explain why. Unease is not evidence, but it accumulates. It shapes probability. It fills gaps where facts cannot reach. The case team debated whether they were constructing a narrative too neatly. Humans crave coherence. We arrange chaos into stories that make sense, sometimes at the expense of truth. The lead detective pushed back against that instinct. He reminded them that coherence had to be tested, not trusted. For every theory, they asked how it could be wrong. For every assumption, what alternative explanation existed. They returned to the phone booth data, now with fresh eyes. The second call, the one aligning with the estimated time of death, lasted longer than the first. Not dramatically longer. Enough to matter. Who was called? Records could not say. But the suspect's landline showed activity shortly afterward, a brief outgoing call, destination unknown. It could have been coincidence. Or it could have been confirmation. A signal. An attempt to anchor reality after something irreversible. When confronted with this detail, the suspect's response was careful. He suggested misattribution. Technical errors. The unreliability of old systems. All reasonable. All unprovable. But he asked, pointedly, how long police intended to pursue this. He asked whether there was any scenario in which the case would be considered closed again. That question echoed long after the interview ended. It framed the entire investigation as a burden rather than a pursuit of truth. It revealed impatience, not exhaustion. And impatience, after decades, felt telling. Pressure mounted from another direction as well. A journalist obtained partial access to the case file through legal means and published a long-form piece. It avoided naming the suspect but laid out the contradictions, the missed opportunities, the reopened wounds. Public reaction was swift. Some demanded accountability. Others accused police of targeting a convenient figure to compensate for past failures. The city divided, not along walls this time, but along interpretations of justice. Anna Keller's family read the article in silence. They did not comment publicly. Privately, they asked one question. If not now, when? They had lived with ambiguity longer than most people live with certainty. The possibility of resolution, even imperfect, felt both necessary and dangerous. Hope had burned them before. Within the department, a final internal review was ordered. Independent analysts were brought in to assess whether the case could support formal charges. They dissected every element without sentiment. Their conclusion was cautious. There was enough to proceed, but only just. The risk of acquittal was real. So was the risk of never acting. The phrase, probable cause, hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be pronounced. As if in response, the past offered one more fragment. A storage unit linked to the suspect, rented decades earlier and forgotten, was discovered through an unrelated audit. It had been emptied years ago, but rental logs showed it had existed in 1978 and 1979. The contents were unknown. The timing was not. It suggested a need for space. For storage. For concealment. Not proof. But another weight added to the scale. Investigators felt the window narrowing. Evidence does not age well. Neither do people. The suspect was older now. Health issues had begun to appear in medical records. Delay could turn justice into an academic exercise, a conclusion without consequence. That realization sharpened resolve. The decision, when it came, was not unanimous. It never is. But it was firm enough. Prosecutors authorized the next step. Not an arrest. Not yet. A formal designation. The suspect would be named publicly as a person of interest in the Berlin 1978 cold case. The announcement was scheduled carefully. Language vetted. Tone controlled. No accusations. No declarations of guilt. Just acknowledgement that after decades, the investigation had narrowed. The city reacted as expected and unexpectedly all at once. Shock. Skepticism. Recognition. Some thought they knew the man. Some realized they had passed him on the street without ever knowing what history walked beside them. The suspect's response was immediate. Through his lawyer, he denied everything. He expressed outrage. He claimed his life was being dismantled by insinuation. He warned of legal action. He did not deny knowing Anna. He did not deny seeing her close to the time of her death. He denied responsibility. That distinction mattered. Detectives watched closely as his behavior changed. Routines disrupted. Movements altered. Stress surfaced in ways that could not be rehearsed. Surveillance, limited and legal, documented restlessness. Long walks at night. Phone calls made and ended abruptly. The calm, forgettable presence described by acquaintances began to fracture. The case, long frozen, was now moving fast enough to be dangerous. Every action risked contamination. Every leak risked mistrial. Investigators moved like surgeons, precise, deliberate, aware that one wrong cut could kill the patient. And still, beneath the momentum, uncertainty pulsed. Cold cases do not yield easily. They resist closure. They punish arrogance. The team knew that even now, after everything, the truth could still slip away. That the final answer might never fully align with the story they had assembled. But something irreversible had happened. The past was no longer passive. It had entered the present, demanding resolution, demanding courage, demanding that Berlin finally decide whether time was an excuse, or an accomplice. Somewhere in the city, a man slept uneasily, aware that a night he had lived with in silence for decades was no longer his alone. And somewhere else, a name spoken too often and understood too little echoed again, not as a mystery, but as a challenge. Anna Keller had not been forgotten. And the case that carried her name was no longer willing to wait. By the time the sun rose over Berlin on the morning after the announcement, the city felt subtly altered, as if a long-held breath had finally been released, only to reveal the ache beneath it. Naming a person of interest did not solve the case. It did something more dangerous. It collapsed distance. It pulled the crime out of archives and into the present tense, where consequences exist and denial becomes active work. The suspect's days changed immediately. Where once he moved unnoticed, now he was watched, not just by police, but by strangers. Eyes lingered. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. Familiarity curdled into suspicion. He complained of harassment, of being judged without trial. And yet, beneath the indignation, there was something else. A vigilance. A carefulness that had not been there before. He was no longer living forward. He was managing exposure. Investigators tracked these shifts closely. Not because altered behavior proves guilt, but because pressure reveals patterns. Under scrutiny, people revert to what they know. Some become defensive. Others nostalgic. Some reach out. Some retreat. The suspect did all of it, in fragments. He contacted old acquaintances from the late 70s, asking casual questions that were not casual at all. He revisited places he had not mentioned in decades. One cafe owner remembered him standing outside for a long time, staring through the window, not ordering anything, just watching. The team debated what that meant. Revisiting scenes can be grief. It can be fear. It can also be rehearsal. An attempt to align memory with reality before they diverge too far. The suspect said he was trying to remember. Trying to help. But memory does not usually require an audience. Meanwhile, forensic work continued, quietly, relentlessly. Advances in technology had not stood still since the last review. The partial DNA profile, once frustratingly inconclusive, was reprocessed using newer statistical models. Still not definitive. Still not a courtroom victory. But the probability margins tightened. The numbers shifted from ambiguous to uncomfortable. Enough to unsettle experts who had once shrugged. Another overlooked item came under renewed scrutiny. Anna's coat, found draped over a chair. Fibers on the sleeve did not match any of her clothing. Originally catalogued as environmental contamination, they were now compared against archived samples taken from the suspect's old apartment during the original investigation. At the time, the comparison had been crude. Now it was precise. The fibers were consistent. Not unique. Not exclusive. But consistent enough to suggest contact. Consistency, in cold cases, is currency. You collect it slowly, knowing it may never be enough, but also knowing that without it, you have nothing. As pressure mounted, the suspect's lawyer requested a formal meeting with prosecutors. The tone shifted from defiant to exploratory. Hypotheticals were raised. What would happen if new evidence emerged? How would cooperation be viewed? These were not admissions. They were probes. Attempts to map risk. The prosecutors listened, gave nothing away. Silence, at this stage, was leverage. Inside the investigation team, exhaustion set in. Years of work compressed into months. Every lead pursued simultaneously. Every decision second-guessed. Some detectives had been children when Anna Keller died. Others were nearing retirement themselves. The case spanned generations, a reminder that justice does not always move at human speed. And then, a moment no one had predicted. The suspect asked to speak again, voluntarily. The request arrived late in the evening, through his lawyer, framed as a desire to clarify misunderstandings. No conditions were attached beyond standard legal presence. The room was prepared carefully. Recording equipment checked. Chairs placed deliberately. This was not an interrogation. It was an opportunity. When he arrived, he looked older than he had weeks earlier. Not frail. just warn. He spoke slowly, choosing words with care, as if each one carried weight he could feel physically. He reiterated his innocence. Then he did something unexpected. He talked about Anna, not defensively, but with detail. He described her voice. Her impatience with inefficiency. The way she tapped her fingers when thinking. These were not details from casual acquaintance. They were the kind of observations made by someone who had spent time watching, listening, learning. Detectives noted the shift. This was not denial. This was recollection. He admitted they had argued. Not that night, he insisted. Earlier. About expectations. About boundaries. He said she misunderstood his intentions. That he felt misjudged. Hurt. He stopped himself, corrected his tone, said he respected her decisions. But the correction came too late. The feeling had surfaced. When asked directly if he had been in her apartment on the night she died, he hesitated. Not long. Long enough. He said no. Then added, unnecessarily, that even if he had been nearby, that did not mean anything. The logic jumped ahead of the question. Detectives recognized the pattern. Anticipation. Defense before accusation. The meeting ended without revelation, but not without consequence. For the first time, the suspect had placed himself emotionally at the center of the story. He was no longer a peripheral figure drawn in by coincidence. He was invested. That investment, whatever its origin, could not be undone. Shortly after, another witness came forward. A woman who had lived in the building in 1978 but had moved abroad soon after. She had seen the coverage online and recognized the name. She remembered a man leaving the building late at night, moving quickly but not running. She remembered because he held the door for her and smiled, as if nothing were wrong. At the time, it meant nothing. Now, decades later, it meant everything. Her description matched. Her timing aligned. Memory is fragile, but some moments etch themselves deeper than others. This one had stayed with her because it felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate then. Politeness in the aftermath of something terrible. Normalcy used as camouflage. Investigators approached this testimony cautiously. They corroborated what they could. Travel records. Building layouts. Sightlines. It did not contradict known facts. It filled a gap. Another layer of consistency. The case crossed an invisible threshold. It was no longer about whether the past could be understood. It was about whether it could be confronted. Prosecutors convened again. The room was quieter this time. Less debate. More calculation. They spoke of narratives juries could follow. Of reasonable doubt and how it might be challenged. Of the risk of letting another year pass, another witness fade, another chance evaporate. A decision was made, conditional but decisive. If one more substantive piece emerged, one more link that moved the case from suggestive to substantial, they would proceed. That knowledge electrified the investigation. Every remaining lead was pursued with urgency. The suspect was monitored closely. Not aggressively. Observationally. Waiting does not mean inactivity. It means readiness. Berlin, sensing something unresolved, leaned in again. The story spread beyond crime pages, into conversations, into memory. People revisited their own pasts, wondering what they had seen, what they had dismissed. Cold cases do that. They turn cities inward. Somewhere in the machinery of law and memory, the Berlin 1978 case edged closer to a point of no return. The truth, whatever shape it would finally take, was no longer content to remain implied. It was pressing forward, demanding to be spoken aloud, even if speaking it would fracture lives long thought complete. And as the city moved through its days, indifferent and alert at once, one fact hardened into certainty. The silence that had protected someone for decades was breaking. And once broken, it would never be whole again. Silence, once fractured, has a way of collapsing inward. After the voluntary interview, after the witness resurfaced from another life, the Berlin 1978 case entered a phase investigators recognized but never welcomed. Everything began to converge at once. Leads that had resisted alignment now pointed in the same direction, not dramatically, but persistently, like water finding the lowest point. The new witness was flown back to Berlin under discreet arrangements. Age had softened her features, but not her certainty. She walked investigators through the building as it had been then, not as it stood now. She described the lighting, dimmer than today, the smell of damp concrete, the echo of footsteps that made every movement feel louder than it should have been. She pointed to the doorway where the man had held the door for her. She remembered the moment because it was wrong. Because his calm felt rehearsed. They asked her the question everyone asks and dreads. "Are you sure it was that night?" She nodded without hesitation. She had been returning from a late shift. She remembered checking her watch because she was annoyed it was so late. Memory, when anchored to emotion, can be stubbornly precise. Her account was cross-checked against everything. Bus schedules. Work records. Weather reports. The position of streetlights that had since been replaced. Nothing contradicted her. Nothing disproved her. In cold case work, that alone is significant. The suspect was informed that a new witness had come forward. His reaction was contained, but not neutral. He asked who she was. Asked how she could remember anything after so long. Asked whether memory could be trusted. The questions came quickly, too quickly, as if he had already rehearsed the argument. He did not ask what she had seen. He assumed it. Forensic analysts, meanwhile, returned to the fibers found on Anna's coat. New techniques allowed for deeper comparison, not just material composition, but manufacturing patterns. The fibers were traced to a type of upholstery fabric common in the late 70s, used in certain apartment furniture. Records from a defunct retailer matched the suspect's purchase history. Again, not proof. Again, consistency. Another thread woven into a tightening fabric. Investigators felt the weight of accumulation. Each piece alone could be explained away. Together, they resisted dismissal. The case was no longer asking whether the suspect could have done it. It was asking how many coincidences could exist before coincidence ceased to be reasonable. Pressure mounted from above. Officials worried about precedent. About the optics of prosecuting a decades-old case built largely on circumstantial evidence. About the possibility of acquittal becoming a public referendum on institutional failure. But there was also another fear, quieter but more corrosive. What if they did nothing? What if the truth was close enough to touch and they chose to look away again? The suspect's behavior continued to shift. Surveillance noted increased agitation. He stopped visiting familiar places. He altered routines repeatedly, as if trying to stay ahead of something unseen. He made calls late at night, ending them abruptly. He began sorting personal belongings, discarding items with unusual urgency. None of it illegal. All of it suggestive of a man preparing. Then came the discovery that tipped the balance. During a review of municipal archives unrelated to the case, a clerk flagged an anomaly. A request filed in 1979 to access sealed building maintenance records for Anna's apartment complex. The requester was not police. It was a private citizen. The name matched the suspect. At the time, the request had been approved without scrutiny. Data protection laws were looser. The significance had been missed. The records he accessed included floor plans, maintenance logs, and notes on lock replacements. Investigators stared at the document in silence. This was not casual curiosity. This was targeted. This was after the murder. After Anna was dead. after police had been through the building. The question was unavoidable. Why would he need that information? When confronted, the suspect's explanation faltered. He claimed an interest in architecture. Claimed he was considering a move. Claimed coincidence. But the timing destroyed credibility. People do not research locks and layouts of a murder scene by accident. Prosecutors were briefed immediately. This was not definitive proof of guilt, but it crossed a line. It demonstrated post-crime behavior inconsistent with innocence. Curiosity after tragedy is human. Strategic research is not. The threshold had been reached. The decision to proceed was made quietly, without ceremony. An arrest warrant would be sought. Not because the case was perfect, but because it was sufficient. Justice does not require certainty. It requires courage to act within doubt. The warrant application was exhaustive. Hundreds of pages. Timelines. Behavioral analysis. Witness statements old and new. Forensic reports layered over historical context. Prosecutors anticipated every defense argument and addressed it preemptively. They knew the trial would be brutal. They also knew delay would only weaken their position. When the judge reviewed the file, he took his time. Cold cases demand restraint. He asked questions. He challenged assumptions. He probed the margins. And then he signed. The arrest was planned for early morning, when routine is most fragile. Officers approached the suspect's residence with measured calm. No sirens. No spectacle. Just inevitability. When the knock came, it was firm, not aggressive. A sound that does not ask permission. He opened the door in a robe, eyes already awake. Surprise flickered briefly, then disappeared. He did not ask why they were there. He asked how long it would take. As he was taken into custody, neighbors watched from behind curtains, recognizing a face they had seen for years without ever seeing it. Ordinary collapses quickly when context changes. A man becomes a question mark. A routine becomes a mask. At the station, he was informed of the charge. Murder. The word landed heavily, as it always does. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He did not protest. He did not confess. He said only that he had been waiting for this. Interrogation followed, formal and restrained. He maintained his denial, but cracks appeared. Not admissions, but slippages. Emotional cues misaligned with content. He spoke of Anna in the present tense, then corrected himself. He described the apartment with accuracy that exceeded prior statements. He caught himself, smiled thinly, and said memory plays tricks. But memory, when suppressed, does not disappear. It waits. News broke by midday. Berlin reacted with a mix of shock and grim recognition. Headlines spoke of closure approaching, of justice delayed but not denied. Others warned against premature conclusions. The city divided again, not violently, but ideologically. Was this accountability, or desperation? Was the past finally being honored, or rewritten to ease guilt? Anna Keller's family was informed privately before the announcement. They listened, hands clasped, faces unreadable. They did not celebrate. They did not cry. They asked what came next. When told there would be a trial, they nodded. Truth, even partial, was better than silence. The suspect was remanded in custody. Bail was denied due to flight risk and the gravity of the charge. Alone in a cell, decades of quiet ended abruptly. Whatever he had lived with since 1978 now had walls, a schedule, a number. Investigators, exhausted and alert at once, knew the hardest part was still ahead. Trials are not about what happened. They are about what can be proven. The narrative they had assembled would be tested, attacked, dismantled piece by piece. But something fundamental had shifted. The case was no longer hypothetical. It had a defendant. A courtroom. A future measured not in years of silence, but in days until judgment. And somewhere beneath the legal machinery, beneath the arguments yet to come, a truth pressed upward. Not demanding vindication. Not promising peace. Simply refusing, at last, to remain buried. Berlin had opened the door it had kept closed for decades. Whatever stepped through next would change everything. The courtroom did not feel like a place for endings. It felt like a place where stories collide, where truth is filtered through rules and language until it barely resembles the thing that lived outside the walls. When proceedings began, Berlin watched with a restrained intensity, aware that this was not just a trial, but a reckoning delayed by time, mistakes, and silence. The defendant sat still as charges were read, his posture composed, his expression almost neutral. Those who had known him struggled to reconcile this image with the word now attached to his name. Murder. It echoed through the chamber, heavy and final. He did not look at the family seated behind the prosecution. He focused straight ahead, as if the past could be avoided by refusing to acknowledge it. The prosecution opened without theatrics. No raised voices. No dramatic pauses. They laid out the timeline calmly, methodically, as if afraid that too much emotion might fracture the fragile structure they had built. A young woman. An unlocked door. No forced entry. A conversation that turned. A death that left no obvious trace of struggle. They emphasized familiarity, proximity, access. They reminded the jury that crimes do not always look violent. Sometimes they look quiet. Sometimes they look almost polite. The defense countered immediately, attacking not the narrative, but the age of it. Memories decay, they argued. Evidence degrades. Investigators project meaning onto coincidence. They warned the jury about the danger of filling gaps with assumption. They described a man whose life had been dismantled by suspicion decades after the fact, a man who could no longer defend himself against time itself. Witnesses took the stand one by one, each carrying a fragment of the past. The woman who had seen the man leave the building spoke carefully, aware of the weight her memory now carried. She admitted uncertainty in minor details, then returned firmly to the core of what she remembered. The timing. The calm. The smile that did not belong. The defense pressed her hard, suggesting suggestion, media influence, reconstruction. She listened, then repeated herself. Some moments, she said, do not blur. Experts followed. Forensic analysts explained fibers, probabilities, consistencies. They spoke in cautious language, aware that overstatement would destroy credibility. The prosecution did not claim certainty. They claimed accumulation. They argued that when enough independent elements point in the same direction, ignoring them becomes unreasonable. The defense seized on that word. Unreasonable. They argued that reason demands doubt. That without direct evidence, without a confession, without a weapon, the case rested on interpretation. They questioned the integrity of the reopened investigation, implied pressure to produce results, hinted at institutional guilt driving the case forward. They reminded the jury that history is full of convictions later overturned. Anna Keller's friends testified next. Older now, voices slower, but their memories sharpened by loss. They spoke of her caution, her kindness, her unease toward a man who would not respect distance. They did not accuse. They described behavior. Persistence. Unwanted presence. Subtle fear. The defense objected repeatedly, calling it character assassination by implication. The judge allowed it, narrowly. Context mattered. The most difficult testimony came from Anna's family. They did not recount the night. They spoke of what followed. Years without answers. Birthdays without celebration. A room left untouched too long. The prosecution was careful, almost restrained, knowing sympathy could backfire. Still, the courtroom felt heavier as their words settled. Absence, described plainly, can be more powerful than accusation. The defendant testified on the 5th day. It was a risk, but a calculated one. He spoke calmly, deliberately. He acknowledged knowing Anna. He acknowledged arguments. He denied violence. He denied being there that night. He framed the relationship as misinterpreted, his intentions benign. When asked why he had accessed building maintenance records after her death, he hesitated, then returned to his explanation of curiosity, of wanting closure. The jury watched closely. Hesitation is not guilt. But it is noticed. Cross-examination was surgical. The prosecutor did not accuse directly. He asked the defendant to reconcile contradictions. To explain why he remembered certain details vividly and others not at all. To clarify why he minimized the relationship initially, then expanded it when confronted. The defendant grew defensive, then controlled himself. He repeated that memory is unreliable. The prosecutor agreed. Then asked why, if memory was so unreliable, his version never changed. That question lingered. As days passed, the case narrowed. Not toward clarity, but toward choice. The jury was not being asked to know exactly what happened. They were being asked to decide whether the prosecution's version was more reasonable than the defense's insistence on coincidence. Cold cases do not offer certainty. They offer patterns and demand judgment. Closing arguments reflected that reality. The prosecution spoke of silence as a form of protection. Of how ordinary lives can conceal extraordinary acts. Of how justice delayed does not invalidate justice pursued. The defense warned against emotional verdicts, against punishing a man for discomfort rather than proof. They urged the jury to remember the standard. Beyond reasonable doubt. When deliberations began, Berlin waited again. Outside the courthouse, cameras stood ready. Commentators speculated. Old wounds reopened in conversation. Some believed closure was finally coming. Others feared a conviction built on shadows. Inside the jury room, time slowed. They reviewed evidence. They argued. They questioned their own instincts. Some were convinced. Others resisted. Doubt did not disappear. It was weighed. After 2 days, the jury returned. The courtroom filled. Breath was held. The foreperson stood, voice steady. The verdict was read. Guilty. The word landed not with triumph, but with gravity. The defendant closed his eyes. Anna's family did not move. The city exhaled, unevenly. Justice, when it arrives late, does not feel victorious. It feels somber. Complicated. Sentencing followed weeks later. The judge spoke of responsibility, of harm that echoes beyond a single life. He acknowledged the imperfections of the case, then affirmed the verdict. The sentence was substantial. Not symbolic. Real. As the defendant was led away, he turned briefly, scanning the room, as if searching for something unnamed. He found nothing. Doors closed. The sound echoed. Berlin returned to itself slowly. Headlines faded. Conversations shifted. But something fundamental had changed. A story long suspended had reached an ending, imperfect but definitive. The past had spoken, and the present had answered. Yet even in resolution, questions lingered. Cold cases never close cleanly. They leave behind shadows where certainty cannot reach. Some would always wonder. Some would always doubt. What remained was this. A door opened in 1978. A life ended. A city waited. And decades later, silence gave way, not to peace, but to truth heavy enough to endure scrutiny. The case was solved. But its echo would remain, woven into Berlin's memory, a reminder that time can hide many things, but not forever. Closure is never as final as it sounds. After the verdict, after the cameras packed away and the courtroom emptied, Berlin was left with something quieter and more unsettling than resolution. The case was solved on paper, sealed by law, but its presence did not recede. It lingered in conversations that trailed off, in pauses where certainty should have lived but didn't quite fit. For investigators, the days after conviction were not celebratory. They were procedural. Reports finalized. Evidence catalogued for long-term storage. A case that had occupied so many years of collective effort now reduced to archival codes and locked rooms. Yet even as the file was closed, hands hesitated before sealing the last box. Cold cases teach you this lesson early. Ending an investigation does not end its gravity. Questions began to surface almost immediately. Not from conspiracy theorists, but from professionals. Legal scholars. Criminologists. Other detectives who studied the case line by line. They asked whether the verdict would have been possible without the passage of time. Whether memory, shaped by repetition, had hardened into certainty. Whether behavior interpreted as guilt could also be the byproduct of pressure. These were not accusations. They were reminders that truth in the legal sense is a construct, one that must operate within human limits. The defense filed an appeal, as expected. Grounds were familiar. Circumstantial evidence. Witness reliability. Prejudicial media coverage. The process moved slowly, deliberately, the way the law always does when stakes are irreversible. For Anna Keller's family, the appeal reopened wounds they had only just allowed themselves to acknowledge. Justice, once obtained, felt suddenly provisional. The defendant adjusted to incarceration with unsettling efficiency. Prison psychologists noted compliance, structure, a preference for routine. He avoided discussions of the crime. When pressed, he spoke in abstractions. Of fate. Of misunderstanding. Of how narratives form around people who can no longer escape them. He did not claim innocence loudly. He implied inevitability quietly. That tone troubled those who listened. Meanwhile, fragments of the past continued to surface, not dramatically, but persistently. A former co-worker of the defendant contacted police, describing a conversation from decades earlier that had once seemed insignificant. A comment about how easily people reveal themselves when they think they're safe. It was anecdotal. Unverifiable. Filed and noted. Cold cases teach another lesson. Nothing ever truly stops arriving. Anna Keller's apartment building became the subject of renewed attention. Journalists revisited it. New residents learned its history. Some felt uneasy. Others indifferent. Life, again, asserted itself. The space where violence occurred was repurposed, renovated, painted over. Physical scars disappear faster than narrative ones. In academic circles, the case was dissected as an example of late-stage justice. Seminars debated whether the conviction represented progress or peril. Some argued it demonstrated the power of persistence and evolving forensic science. Others warned of confirmation bias, of narratives growing stronger as alternatives fade. Both sides agreed on one thing. The case would be studied for years. For the lead detectives, retirement loomed. They reflected privately on what had driven them to keep pushing. Not certainty. Not ambition. Something simpler and harder to define. A refusal to accept that silence equals innocence. A belief that unresolved violence corrodes communities, even when hidden. Anna's family retreated from public view. They visited her grave more often now, not because answers had finally arrived, but because they no longer felt suspended in waiting. Grief had shifted shape. It was no longer sharpened by uncertainty, but it was no less heavy. They spoke of her in the present again. That, in its own way, felt like reclaiming something stolen. The appeal process moved forward methodically. Motions filed. Responses drafted. Hearings scheduled months apart. Each date circled on calendars like a quiet threat. The city paid less attention now. Headlines had moved on. Attention is finite. Justice is not always loud. And yet, beneath the surface, the case continued to resonate. It surfaced in discussions about trust, about familiarity, about how danger often arrives without force. It reminded people that violence does not always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like conversation. Sometimes it looks like someone you recognize. One evening, long after the trial, a journalist reread the original police reports from 1978. In the margins, in faded ink, was a note written by an unknown hand. Feels wrong. Too neat. No explanation followed. Just the intuition of someone who sensed something off but lacked the tools, the support, or the permission to pursue it further. The journalist closed the file slowly, understanding how easily such instincts are buried by urgency and order. The appeal was eventually denied. The ruling was concise. The court acknowledged imperfections, then affirmed the jury's conclusion. Reasonable doubt had been considered. The verdict stood. With that, the legal chapter ended. But stories do not obey legal boundaries. They live on, reshaped by retelling, by doubt, by belief. For some, the conviction confirmed what they had long suspected. For others, it left a residue of uncertainty that no ruling could erase. Cold cases do not resolve consensus. They resolve questions just enough to force people to confront what they believe about truth. Berlin absorbed the outcome the way cities always do. Gradually. Selectively. The case slipped into history, referenced occasionally, invoked as example or warning. Life continued, layered over old ground. Yet the echo remained. A reminder that silence can be temporary, that time can be both shield and weapon, and that truth, when delayed long enough, arrives carrying consequences for everyone it touches. The door that opened in 1978 had finally been closed by law. But memory does not lock so easily. It waits, attentive, ready to reopen whenever the city forgets how quietly everything began. Time has a way of testing every conclusion, even those stamped with authority. In the months after the appeal was denied, the Berlin case entered a new phase, one without hearings or verdicts, but no less intense. It became a presence rather than an event, something that hovered at the edges of professional discussions and private thoughts, resurfacing whenever someone asked an uncomfortable question about certainty. Inside law enforcement circles, the case was revisited quietly. Not reopened, not challenged, but examined. Younger investigators asked veterans what they would have done differently if they had been there in 1978. The answers were never simple. Some spoke about missed opportunities, about interviews that ended too soon, about a culture that preferred clear narratives over unsettling ambiguity. Others admitted that they might have done the same, constrained by limited technology and pressure to move on. The past, when viewed honestly, rarely offers clean alternatives. Forensic science journals published retrospective analyses. They praised the careful restraint of the prosecution, the avoidance of overstated claims, the discipline of probability rather than absolutes. At the same time, they highlighted the fragility of late-stage reconstructions. Evidence does not only degrade physically. It erodes context. Meaning shifts. What once felt ordinary can later appear suspicious, simply because it survived. The defendant's life behind bars settled into predictability. Days marked by routine. Conversations kept superficial. Those who interacted with him described an unsettling calm, not defiance, not despair, but acceptance shaped like resignation. He spoke rarely of the past, and when he did, it was with distance, as if referring to someone else's story. Psychologists noted this detachment, debating whether it reflected guilt managed through compartmentalization or innocence crushed by inevitability. No conclusion followed. Only notes. Outside, the building where Anna Keller died was sold again. Renovated once more. New owners chose lighter colors, larger windows, more open space. They did not consult history. Few ever do. Yet some residents reported unease, not tied to knowledge, but to atmosphere. Sounds that felt too loud at night. Silences that felt deliberate. Places carry memory even when people try to erase it. The media revisited the case on anniversaries, each time with a slightly different tone. Early coverage had been sharp, declarative. Later pieces became reflective, almost philosophical. Headlines shifted from "solved" to "what the Berlin cold case teaches us." The certainty softened. The story matured. It stopped being about one man and one crime and became about time itself. Students wrote theses on it. Filmmakers pitched adaptations that were never made, stalled by ethical debates about dramatizing unresolved doubt. Podcasts dissected it episode by episode, voices measured, careful not to accuse or exonerate too strongly. Listeners were drawn not to answers, but to the tension between them. Anna Keller's name became something more than a victim's label. In discussions, she was invoked as a reminder of the human cost beneath abstraction. A person reduced to evidence. A life framed by legal argument. Her friends kept her alive in quieter ways, sharing stories not meant for public consumption. The laugh that startled. The stubbornness. The plans she never got to finish. For them, the case was never theoretical. Occasionally, anonymous letters arrived at newsrooms. Claims of knowledge. Confessions implied but never stated. Most were dismissed. A few were investigated briefly, then archived. Cold cases attract gravity. They pull in those who want proximity to darkness without consequence. Sorting signal from noise becomes harder as time passes. One retired detective admitted, in a private conversation, that certainty had never been the goal. "We were chasing coherence," he said. Something that made sense of what we couldn't live with otherwise. He did not say this to undermine the verdict. He said it to explain the human need behind it. The case influenced policy in subtle ways. Guidelines for reopening cold cases were refined. Standards for witness memory reevaluation tightened. Training emphasized the distinction between narrative strength and evidentiary strength. Progress did not announce itself. It rarely does. Years continued to move forward. The city changed. New crises claimed attention. The Berlin case slipped further into the background, no longer current, not yet distant enough to be forgotten. It occupied a middle space, where unresolved meaning tends to live. And in that space, the most unsettling aspect of the case persisted. Not the crime itself. Not even the verdict. But the realization that justice, when delayed, becomes something different. Less about correction. More about reconciliation with imperfection. The law had spoken. Procedures had been followed. A decision had been reached. Yet the echo remained, not accusing, not absolving, simply present. A reminder that some truths resist compression into final words, and that even solved cold cases can leave behind a chill that time cannot quite dispel. The story was nearing its end, but the unease it generated had found a longer life, woven quietly into Berlin's collective memory, waiting for the next moment when someone would ask, again, whether knowing is the same as understanding. The final chapter did not arrive with noise. It came quietly, the way endings often do when a story has already taken too much time. Years had passed since the verdict, enough for faces to age, for names to fade from headlines, for the word "cold case" to feel less immediate, more archival. And yet, the Berlin 1978 case never truly settled. It didn't close. It thinned, stretched, dissolved into the background of the city's consciousness, still present, still faintly pulsing. On a winter morning, long after public interest had moved elsewhere, a small plaque was placed near the building where Anna Keller died. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a name, a date, and a sentence about remembrance. Passers-by rarely stopped. Those who did read quietly, then moved on. Memory does not demand crowds. It survives in recognition. Inside police archives, the case file rested among others like it, thick, heavy, final in appearance. But anyone who opened it felt the same thing investigators always feel when they revisit such cases. The awareness that certainty is a privilege rarely granted. The file told a story that held together. It did not promise completeness. Margins remained. Questions lingered without invitation. The defendant aged behind walls designed to erase individuality. His hair grayed. His movements slowed. He filed no further appeals. Those who monitored him noted a steady withdrawal, not into despair, but into something like resignation. He spoke less. He read more. When asked, once, by a prison chaplain whether he felt wronged by history, he replied only that history always chooses someone. No elaboration followed. In academic writing, the case gradually shifted categories. From recent conviction to historical example. It became a reference point, a citation, a footnote in discussions about delayed justice. The language cooled. Emotional weight was replaced by analysis. But even in that clinical distance, authors struggled to avoid one recurring phrase. Lingering doubt. It appeared again and again, not as accusation, but as acknowledgement. Anna Keller's family reached a place that outsiders often misunderstand. Not peace. Acceptance. They stopped waiting for the case to give them something more. They reclaimed control over how her story was told, focusing less on the manner of her death and more on the shape of her life. In private gatherings, they laughed again when her name came up. That, more than any verdict, felt like survival. The city itself carried on, layered over its own past. New buildings rose. Old ones were demolished. Streets were renamed. Tourists passed through unaware of what had happened decades earlier. Berlin had learned, as cities do, how to absorb tragedy without being defined by it. But absorption is not erasure. It is storage. Occasionally, someone new would discover the case for the first time. A student. A journalist. A listener stumbling onto an old broadcast late at night. They would feel the same pull. The same discomfort. The same need to know whether the ending was true, or merely necessary. They would search for a final answer and find instead a carefully constructed conclusion, strong enough to stand, fragile enough to question. That is the legacy of cold cases solved late. They do not resolve the past. They rearrange it. They ask the present to carry weight that should have been borne long ago. They force communities to decide what they are willing to accept as truth when time has taken its toll. The Berlin 1978 case ended on paper. It ended in court. It ended in law books. But in memory, it remains open, not as a wound, but as a reminder. A reminder that some crimes wait patiently. That silence can be mistaken for absence. And that answers, when they finally arrive, rarely sound like relief. Somewhere between justice and doubt, between certainty and acceptance, the story comes to rest. Not resolved in the way people hope for. Resolved in the way reality allows. A door opened once. A life ended. Decades passed. And in the end, what remained was not just a verdict, but an echo, steady, unresolved, and impossible to fully silence. There is no 13th chapter waiting beyond this one, no revelation hidden behind a curtain of time, no final witness stepping forward to untangle what remains. What follows instead is the long quiet that settles after a story has spent itself, the silence that does not erase what came before but forces it to coexist with the present. In Berlin, the year 1978 has receded into abstraction. For most, it is no longer a memory but a reference point, a number attached to a case name, a marker in an archive. Yet abstraction does not mean insignificance. It means distance, and distance changes how truth is handled. It becomes something examined rather than felt, something discussed rather than endured. Those who live through it still feel the shift when the case is mentioned. A tightening. A pause. A brief recalibration of thought. They remember what it was like not knowing, when speculation filled the vacuum left by facts, when fear was ambient and unspoken. For them, the verdict did not overwrite those years. It layered on top of them, another weight added to an already heavy memory. The investigators who once chased the case are gone now, retired, dispersed, some no longer alive. Their notebooks sit in boxes, their instincts unrecorded. What remains of their work is formalized, cleaned of hesitation, stripped of the uncertainty that shaped it in real time. Files do not capture doubt well. They record decisions, not the nights spent questioning them. New generations learn about the case as a lesson. About patience. About persistence. About the dangers of both action and inaction. They are taught that cold cases demand humility, that solving them does not mean conquering the past, but negotiating with it. The Berlin case is offered as proof that answers can come late, and as warning that lateness extracts a price. The defendant's name has lost its immediacy. It no longer provokes outrage or defense. It has settled into the category reserved for those defined by a single act, regardless of how much life surrounded it. He exists now as a record, a sentence, a cautionary figure. Whatever complexity he once carried has been flattened by time and outcome. Anna Keller's name endures differently. It appears in articles, in lectures, on the small plaque near the building. But more importantly, it survives in the private language of those who knew her, where it is not followed by descriptors like victim or case, but by memories unfit for public record. Those memories resist closure. They were never meant to be resolved. Every so often, someone asks the question that never quite disappears. What if the truth was simpler? Or more complicated? Or just slightly different from what the verdict declared? The question is not subversive. It is human. It arises not from distrust, but from the understanding that certainty is rare, especially when time has intervened. The legal system answered as best it could. It weighed. It deliberated. It concluded. That conclusion stands. It must. Without that, nothing else holds. But standing does not mean silencing every doubt. It means choosing a line beyond which society agrees to stop asking, not because curiosity is gone, but because function demands it. And so the story ends the way many true stories do. Not with clarity, not with relief, but with acceptance shaped by limits. The limit of memory. The limit of evidence. The limit of what can be repaired once time has passed. The Berlin 1978 cold case was solved, officially, irrevocably. Yet its true legacy lies not in the verdict, but in the quiet understanding it left behind. That justice can arrive late and still matter. That truth can be sufficient without being complete. And that some echoes are not meant to fade, only to remind. A door opened once, without warning. A life ended. Years accumulated. And in the space between what was known and what was decided, a city learned how to live with an answer that was final, and a mystery that never entirely disappeared.